Oh, is that what? All right.
I'll bet. Anthony Slater is going to be joining us here. Well, what are we going to ask Anthony about today, Trace? What do we need?
I don't know, man. What is Doug and 5-game win streak? Trades? What?
Yeah. Anthony
Beat
Slater.
down to the Warriors?
Yeah,
that
let's
too?
start there. Slates, what did you make of what the Kings did to the Warriors Sunday night?
It was impressive. Malik Monk looked like all NBA first team guard in that game. He was unbelievable. I will say I was surprised the Warriors didn't go to Kevon Looney a bit more. I mean, Sabonis killed Trace Jackson-Davis.
Yeah.
It was impressive, though. I mean, it was a juiced-up team, which we'll get to, like the shift in energy that's clear, against what just looked like a tired team that's trying to figure out who they are. And it was bad. It was, the other thing is, I mean, Steph Curry mentioned it post-game, but my biggest takeaway from that game, at least from the Warriors side, is Steph is basically talking about if they get in a hole, they're not built to be a comeback team because they're not a good offensive team, and I think it was kind of laid bare in that game.
Anthony Slater joining
Hi,
us.
this is Greg Papa, Disaster City.
Greg Papa always trying to get some FaceTime, right?
Slates now. Relax.
I know. Papa always trying to get himself in there. Hey, Slates, I want to talk about my guy, Keon Ellis. He was big in that Warriors game, big last night. Why do you think he's been unlocked with Doug Christie as interim coach?
They're playing him more. I think, and obviously the Keegan De'Aaron injuries, I mean, they didn't come at necessarily a good time for the Kings. You don't want to not have those guys, but, he's been in the starting lineup the last 4 games because they've missed, they've been missing starters, and that's allowed them to play 30-something minutes. I'm actually very curious when Fox comes back, which is obviously going to be very soon. He's like the way Keon Ellis is playing, particularly on the defensive end, as you saw him in crunch time last night, where, Jaime Jaquez is trying to bully him and he's stripping the ball. Like, you start to go, man, this is a good closing option here. But when Fox is back, Monk's clearly, starting and closing at this point. Like, do you close it with him over DeRozan right now?
Interesting.
I mean, it's probably a nightly thing. If DeRozan has it going. I mean, DeRozan hit 2 of the biggest shots last night, obviously in double OT. But as you try to rebalance the lineup, as you try to maybe feature Keon Ellis more, that's clearly been a big part of this little 5-game win streak. Like, I could hear the argument. I could definitely hear the argument that you want that defensive ace out there, and you don't necessarily need, all the extra, scoring.
Slates, as we try to figure out why the Kings are playing so much better, we're looking at what's different. Is it possible the tension between ownership and the coach, the dysfunction, whatever you want to call it, was that possibly just starting to drag the team down, and they're just playing more freely as a result of not having that swirling around them right now?
Yeah, I'm sure that has a little to do with it. Clutch time luck, obviously. I mean, you can't ignore what some of the subtle comments from the players over the last, after the last few wins, where it's talking about, simplified schemes, and Malik Monk said something last night about, basically playing for a coach that was a former player. Yeah. It's a little bit of kind of the new car smell. You see it a lot in sports. New coach comes in and you hear them talk about a lot of what's different from the older coach, and they're almost like subtle digs that are pretty obvious if you're reading between the tea leaves. Sure. I also think that just that the firing of Mike Brown and the firestorm it created while that was all swirling with De'Aaron Fox's future up in the air, I just feel like it just really upped the urgency level generally in the franchise, and suddenly you have a team that I think is staring at at an existential moment of the future of this core being very much in question. And obviously right now, at least the players seem to be saying it's a coach they're playing hard for, that they're just playing with almost a playoff level fervor, right? I mean, that last night, that arena seemed like it was game 5 of a playoff series, almost the way they were flying around. And it's that's going to win a lot of regular season games. Now, how sustainable is it? Particularly when 14 of 18 on the road coming up, some tough environments, some tough teams, maintaining that energy over the course of a marathon season and marathon road trips and all that's going to be difficult, but they're playing with a lot of juice right now, and that goes a long way in the NBA, particularly on the defensive end.
Hey, Anthony Slater joining us. Slate's, with this 5-game winning streak, how do you think it impacts Monty and Wes and those guys' decision or indecision on whether to make a big splash at the trade deadline? Do you think it has any impact?
Yeah, I think it motivates them a little bit more. I think, and a lot of teams are going through this in this like early January point where, a core, a team needs to prove itself worthy of using future capital to help the current moment, right? I mean, because I do think there's risk involved. Let's use Cam Johnson, for example. Cam Johnson presumably would take at least one future first round pick. And I think the Kings are at a moment where we know Cam Johnson would really help this team, but they need to decide if giving up a 2027 first, a 2028 first, whatever it is worth it to get a, fifth starter on this team. Is this team worth kind of trying to push the gas pedal forward, knowing that if it blows up in the summer, if Fox is gone, if they hit a full rebuild, that's a really valuable chip to have lost, a Kings 2028 first when they might be in a rebuild. So to your question, the more they win, the more they look like a team that, hey, they could be a playing team. Maybe they can sneak back up to the 60. Maybe they can make some noise in the playoffs. Maybe they're a Cam Johnson away from leveling up a little bit. Then, yeah, I mean, you would be theoretically more motivated to then use a future tool to get it done. And that's really what the next month is about because, the Nets can kind of hold the line until they get an offer they like. And once you're willing to go to a point the Nets want, I know I'm just using Cam as an example. There's plenty of names across the league. Then maybe you can get something done. But, I do think that the Kings materializes and they look themselves in the mirror and is this team worth, sending out a future first or multiple future first? I don't know the answer. I don't know what you guys think. I mean, are you starting to believe?
I believed even before this streak, to be honest with you, Slates. I feel like, especially the way the West is outside of OKC, I think, a lot of ground can be made up. To me, at this point, a successful season for the Kings is a top 6. If you make it to the second round, great. But considering where they started to where they can finish, I still believe in this team. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the idea of Cam Johnson on this team, and I have for a couple of years now. If I could get him and just give away one first rounder, I think I'd do it. I'm also thinking, the scenario that you laid out, Slates, let's say it does fall apart and De'Aaron wants out. I figure I could probably get at least one first rounder back for that. But in general,
multiple, I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to trade multiple first rounders because I think I might need them, but we'll see. A lot of pizza left in that box.
I do think the protections really matter here because a guy like Cam Johnson's worth, hey, you lost the 14th overall pick in 2028. Okay, whatever. Yeah. What you want to protect against is, if you send an unprotected pick, which became very in vogue right back to the Rudy Gobert trades and a few of the ones before that, the unprotected picks. If you send one out and then suddenly it's 2028 and it's like a stacked draft and you're giving away Victor Wembanyama 2.0 basically, that's what you want to avoid. That would be the concern of they did the pick swap in 2031 with the Spurs. If that's suddenly flipping 30 for 2 or something like that, that's, your airwaves are going to be going crazy come that day. But also at the same time, look, they have chips pushed into this era. That's partly why, this has gone down this way in the last couple of weeks because of the urgency of the moment. And if you're West, if you're Monty McNair, if you're people, making decisions about the Kings of now, you're probably not that worried about 2031, 2027, because if this doesn't go the way you need it to go right now,
right,
might be different people in charge making those decisions, right?
Mm-hmm. Friday, Boston, Sunday, Chicago, Tuesday, Milwaukee. You were talking about the upcoming schedule. Does the Doug Christie honeymoon survive this road trip?
I mean, yes, in the sense of like, if they went 1-2, let's say beat Chicago, lose to Boston, lose to Milwaukee, which is probably like, the path most would predict. Like, you're not hitting the panic button too much. They have a chance to really accelerate forward if they go upset the Celtics in Boston. But I wouldn't look at, this 3-game stretch as something that's going to make or break the season. But I would look at, what did I say? It was 14 of 18, I've heard it is on the road. Like that as you widen that back out, and let's say over that 18, can you go 9-9? I think 9-9 would be, it would keep them above water, would keep them treading, heading towards the deadline, would certainly keep them in that compact race in the West, where, by the way, look around them. I mean, I know we talk about this every week, but everybody's in disarray. I'm about to go Warriors Heat tonight. Which of these two franchises, that I'm going to see tonight is in a tougher spot? Phoenix, are they they're bullying Bradley Beal right now into trying to waive his no trade or whatever's happening there? So if they can just go 9-9 over a really, gauntlet of a stretch prior to the deadline, I think that would say something. Now, if 9-9 is instead 5-13, that's where you could really lose some ground. And this is a really tough stretch.
Slates, when do you think things will really start popping off in earnest regarding trades? Do we still have tons of time here? You won't expect anything maybe to the week of the trade deadline.
Well, Butler, right? We're watching Butler. Yeah. The Heat have publicly, which was kind of a surprise, publicly announced they're listening to offers at this point. So that feels like such a domino that it's a little bit like free agency. How typically every year you go into free agency and there's one or two huge names at the top, and they kind of hold the line for everybody else until they make a decision, because there's the domino effect after them. You might see that with trades a little bit, where there's a lot of teams wondering how the Jimmy Butler thing lands. If this turns into a 3-team, 4-team type deal to because everything's so complicated in the apron world and Butler's amount of salary, once that gets settled, if it gets settled, then maybe you start to see some of the smaller deals after that kind of, I guess, materialize. But to your question, typically every year you have a few prior to the deadline, and we've already had a couple. But then deadline day and the hours, or in the day leading up to it or so, you get 9, 10, 11 trades.
We'll let you go on this one, Slates. Just your opinion. I know you see the beam. I don't know how you feel about the beam, but Lawrence Butler of the A's he was at the arena last night. He says, hey, I suggest we get our own beam. What do you think of the idea of the A's having their own green beam? And some nights in the spring, we could have the purple beam from the Gold One and the green beam from, Sutter Health Park. Should the A's get their own beam in Sacramento?
I saw, Tom's Watch Bar had a beam. I saw outside of Golden One. It was,
really?
Yeah. They were. It was. I think it was after the Sixers game. I saw it.
Okay.
It was kind of, not too strong of a beam. It almost just looked like a flashlight was going up.
It was beamish, right? It was beamish. Yeah.
I would say it's probably a good idea. The A's, it seemed like, are trying to really kind of ingratiate themselves, into Sacramento. They're spending. How about they're actually spending money.
Yeah.
They left the Bay Area, and now they want to throw a contract around.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that was required as part of the move, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It would probably, you got to win. I mean, that's the thing. The beam was so, it broke onto the scene so much in that first Mike Brown season because they won 48 games, and it was like, wow, it's, they are actually lighting it. It felt like early on it was going to be a joke because it was like, Kings can't win. And even early they had that 0-5 homestand, and it was like, it was almost disheartening that they couldn't light the beam. I remember there was a couple games, right at the end of the game, they kind of bring that beam that they have in the arena now to the tunnel, and they're waiting to bring it out thinking a win is about to happen. Well, the Pistons game happens, for example, where the entire arena thinks they're about to light the beam, and then they're not. It almost adds to the heartache if you can't. So I guess to wrap it back to your question about the A's, are they going to be good this year? They were actually kind of surprisingly decent last year. They're spending some money. I know you didn't bring me on to analyze the MLB here, but I think the beam does work if they have a surprisingly good season, and is probably looked down upon if they don't.
Are they beam worthy? Great question. Yeah. Thanks, Slates. We appreciate it. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, fellas.
All right. Anthony Slater.
There you go. He had a hard time with that one.
Yeah, that's a tough one, right? He actually pondered